Good to go? Amazing. So, hello everybody and welcome to our Winter Residency Artist Showcase this evening. I'm so happy that so many of you have managed to come out and join us tonight, here in the room and online, which is brilliant. I'm Vic, I am Watershed's Talent Development Lead, and alongside my colleague Martin, who you'll meet shortly, I've been working really closely with artists Nat Whitney and Geraint during their time here at Watershed. Over the past couple of months, Nat and Geraint have participated in our Winter Residencies, and this is a development programme that offers artists space and support to make and test ideas that are embedded within the Pervasive Media Studio, which is our creative technologies research hub. Our residency theme for this year was actual reality. Pervasive Media Studio was founded quite a long time ago now, in 2008. And back then, we were excited about the possibilities of mobile technology, taking kind of computing and media beyond the computer screen. And we imagined pervasive media sort of delivered to people out in the physical world via sensors and location-based technologies. Back then, we explored mixing creativity and wireless content and looking at how they could bring stories alive in outdoor spaces, how tech could turn car parks into board games, and how wearable devices connected people together with one another, and lots more. We were hopeful about the future and how we might build experiences that pervaded the physical live world in ways that weren't possible before. So now we're almost 2 decades later than that, and many of these technologies are part of our daily lives, but instead of being kind of liberated from our computer screens in the way we imagined, we're sort of tied more and more to our individual devices and like lots of kind of app-based things. So we worry about isolation and a constriction of imaginative potential in that, but we're also inspired by the ways that these tools have been adapted and subverted to meet the needs of individuals and groups that were never considered in their original design. So this year, through an open call, we actively sought artists that took computing out of the computer and into the live world. We asked what pervasive media could look like that kind of combined those dreams of 2008 with the technologies of 2025, and how those dreams needed to shift and grow to reflect a kind of changed understanding of where we are today and how we want to move into the future. So this residency was an opportunity for Nat and Geraint to kind of delve into their own research around this theme and develop artwork in response. So they've spent over the past couple of months probably about 11 days of time doing this. So the work you'll experience this evening is like very much ideas in progress. We'll begin in a moment by screening 2 short films which kind of share the project with you a little bit. This will be followed by a conversation between Nat, Geraint and Watershed studio community lead Martin O'Leary, and that will be followed by a Q&A, so if you have questions that you want to ask, there'll be opportunity to do that both in the room and online. After the Q&A, if you're here in person, we'd be delighted if you could join us in Pervasive Media Studio, which is kind of just behind this wall over here, because we've got some kind of excerpts of the work that you can have a look at, and there's more opportunity to chat with one another. If you're online at that point, we'll say a hearty goodbye at the end of the Q&A. And just to note here in the room that, I think they let you know when you were coming in that we are documenting the event this evening. So if you prefer not to be photographed, just let us know and we can make sure you're not in those. I think that's everything from me. So we'll begin now by screening the films. Thank you.
I quite often make things that I think are quite serious, and people often find them funny, and I don't know what that means. I've been thinking about how we can hide the medium and put little snippets of little moments in normal places that we are not expecting and that they are just things that you sort of stumble upon, really. The plug hole started a long time ago. You spend quite a long time staring at it, you're brushing your teeth. And so I started drawing it quite a lot. After a while, I started adding sentences or little thoughts, just sort of concepts, little thoughts, ideas that came out of the plug hole as I was brushing my teeth, when you're in that sort of dead space and your brain switches off and things occur to you. And then it occurred to me I'd really, really like to have that voice reading those thoughts come out of the actual plug hole and sort of embed that somewhere out in the world. You'd have to do a little bit of, where's that coming from? Maybe there's a few syncs. I think is it coming out of that plug hole? And you'd get closer. And then this voice is coming out and it's saying these phrases, sort of truisms, aphorisms, things that you might want to spend a bit of time pondering, but they're relentless. So they come one after another. But then you can turn them off because you can trigger the tap, and then that makes it turn into a gargling voice reading out those same sentences. Your trousers are an idea. The stairs are an idea. Your dog. Think about the small things in front of you. I think curiosity is important. I think discovering something, working it out yourself is just a lot more interesting than having something given to you. So that's kind of what I'm interested in, really, leaving the gaps that other people can fill with themselves, and that sort of makes it meaningful and, something they can relate to. I wanted to think about how outside there are so many stories and nods to stories all around us, and I just wanted to sort of think about how we could layer on top of those things, or just tell someone that isn't the thing that's there, it's something else that's there. That's the sort of end point, really, that you create a sort of whole landscape of a place. I don't really mind if they don't have a sort of big wow moment. That's not really what I'm after. But if anybody has a bit of I'd be happy with that.
I'm really interested in how we connect to each other in the same reality, in the same space. And so when I linked in my project idea and looking at the evolution of communication technologies and those early 2000s ideas of these futuristic systems, thinking about those dreams and then combining that with my normal way of working, it seemed to really fit with what I'd like to explore, and thinking about how we can connect to each other now with the technology we have in a reimagined, or in the way it currently is, but just a little bit differently. I often work in spaces where I don't know who's going to come through the door, and I always like to make work that anyone could interact with on some level. So I work a lot with multi-sensory work, and that also goes back to thinking about not having things that are heavily tech appearing, so using things that people are familiar with that make them feel comfortable to invite them in. But I'd like to make things that people can take something away from, whether it's they really like the feel of the material or the sound or the whole interaction, just something that they connect with. It's really interesting to just look at the way we communicate, and I think if I can create a space that just makes you start to think about it, I'm not saying it's going to change the way we communicate, but just start to think why we use the tools we do to communicate, and are they the best for us? Are they caring for us? Are they really efficient? And I'm really interested in questioning that. I'm not anti-mobile phone, I'm not sort of big anti-screen. We all use screens, we can't escape them, but to create a space where you've come away from that and it opens up possibilities to question how might it be different, I think it's really important and really valuable. Yeah, there's a lot to it. I find the relationship between artist, participant, and then whatever you've created really interesting, and it shifts throughout the process. And it goes from that artist-object, really strong intertwined relationship, and then that point that you hand it over or invite people into the space or offer it, it then becomes this triangle where maybe you're slightly more removed as the artist or the initial maker, or you might be part of that space where you're co-creating. Yeah, that shifting relationship is really interesting. My work revolves around participants. It does exist, but until it's activated by someone, that is most of the work. And that's where I learn the most. So being in spaces like this, where I can prototype something, put it out into the world, and people can play with it, yeah, that's what I dream about doing. That's what I enjoy the most.
All right.
Hello.
Well, good evening, folks. That light is a lot. Good evening, folks. As Vic said, my name is Martin O'Leary. I'm the studio community lead for the Pervasive Media Studio here at Watershed. And over the last couple of months, I've had the extraordinary pleasure of working with Nat Whitney and Geraint as they've worked through these projects. So in a little while, we will open this to questions to the room, if you have any for the artists. I'm sure some of you do. But for now, I would like to get us started and maybe start with you, Nat, and ask sort of about like how these ideas have developed over the course of the residency and like what your process is for working through this sort of thing.
So it always usually starts with lots of scribbling, lots of research, and then making lots of small maquettes that I can take out and test. And in the video, the two sort of strange tube beings, that was where this idea came from. And I think I came in really wanting to develop the tech, and I was thinking, oh, I'm in a tech space, I can get all this knowledge and develop that bit. And then when I started to go down the research rabbit holes, I got really into the materials and how they feel, and then how that links into the interaction. Yeah, and got a lot more into different types of materials and what they can do.
How about you, Geraint?
Well, quite different from what I've been doing recently. I've made a lot of stuff about digital and physical media and translating them backwards and forwards. And while I was doing all that, I was sort of amassing this other sort of pile of stuff that didn't fit into all of that, and that I wanted to do something about making moments out in the world and in actual reality. And yeah, so I started thinking about different ways to do that and exploring that here. It's a really good place to do it.
Okay, could you talk a bit about the process of getting there? Like, what did that look like?
Well, I remember on day one you asked me what I wanted to make, and I sort of threw a bunch of ideas out there, and you were saying, yeah, but if you had to choose one, though. And I very annoyingly said, well, all of them, because they're all kind of the same sort of thing. And I know you're quite worried that I wouldn't do anything, but I have actually done one thing.
I wasn't expecting that to be flipped back on me quite so quickly. But, could you maybe talk a little bit, Geraint, about some of the influences and inspiration for this kind of work?
Yeah, well, I started looking a lot at audio walks because I've always really liked audio walks ever since I did Janet Cardiff's case study, Be Missing Voice, around Whitechapel. It's just a brilliant example of layering the present space with fictions. So they start to overlap and you get sort of confused about what's real. And I really like that as an experience. And I've always wanted to make something like that. And so it's kind of what I'm moving towards. And I like Katie Patterson's work, because she deals a lot with scale, huge and tiny. And I like scale because it's properly universal. And then there's a David Lynch quote that I've been carrying around with me for a long, long time. And it's, we think we understand the rules when we become adults, but what we really experience is a narrowing of the imagination and that's something that I want to constantly sort of expose and sort of bring out, really.
How about you, Nat? Well, what influenced and inspired you?
I think the main inspiration, which I think I mentioned in the film, is I get really excited by making something and offering it to someone else. That's always really exciting, because people always do, well, you don't know what they're going to do and they always surprise you. Especially I work a lot with toddlers, they always surprise you. And in terms of sort of works that I've seen that have stuck with me, the work of Akila Bertram, I saw their Altaverse, which is an installation and performance, and that's really stuck with me for a long time. I don't like the word immersive because it's used a lot, but I would describe that as immersive because it really, took my full attention. And something else I saw more recently was Nama Sabar's Estuaries as part of Berlin Art Week, which were these incredible sculptures, and the performers sort of picked you up as you went and followed you and sort of collected you around the space as they performed, and it kind of peaked and dipped, and that was really incredible and emotional as well. And the last one, because it was on this residency, I got to work with someone that makes adventure playgrounds. That's their job, which was just incredible, and work with them for a week with found materials, just building playgrounds, and they said yes to everything that we wanted to do. So that was really fantastic as well.
So usually I try and draw connections between the works of the artists who are sitting up here, and I will admit it was a little bit of a struggle for this one. But I think what I found was that both of your work is about this sort of oblique kind of communication. It's not about like directly sending a message. It's about like coming at it from an angle and so on. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit, maybe you, Nat, first, about what the value of that is for you.
Yeah. I think I'm really interested in non-verbal communication and all the ways we talk to each other without spoken words and without language, because there are so many ways we do that. And creating spaces where you feel like you can talk to people and you want to, because we don't always want to. I know I go in spaces sometimes and I'm too anxious to talk to people. So what would I like in there that would actually make me connect with someone else who I might not usually connect with? And how different objects can do that, I think is quite exciting. I'll leave it there because I'll keep going.
I think there was something really interesting. At one point you showed me a diagram where you'd scribbled out the word always from always on and written sometimes on top.
Yeah, that's come back to me a lot. So during the residency where I built the beings, I kind of imagined these two playable communication towers, like you go and visit when you needed to connect with yourself or someone else in the future. And I'd written like playable communication towers, always open, and I crossed it all out and put sometimes. And it was in the middle of a really intensive week, so I think I was like, I'm not always open to communicating this week. I need some time. So that was probably it. And then that was really interesting in my research. That came up so much looking at telephone boxes, and they say like always open, public telephone boxes. But what if someone's not on the other end of the phone? That came up a lot. And then what happens then?
How about you, Geraint? I know you've been sort of thinking about these sort of aphorisms and sort of trying to pass on a message without actively saying it.
Yeah. There's a lot of, something show don't tell is the thing that I find sort of quite difficult, really, because obviously there's an awful lot of tell in that. You know, it's just the voice telling you stuff the whole time and telling you not to do stuff or things in a really stern sort of voice, but. I guess you have a different relationship with it because it gives you agency because you can shut it off and you can, and you can, there are enough gaps in there. I don't agree with all of the things that it says completely. So there's enough space, I think, that they are sort of discussion points so that you could disagree with them. Because, it's really important to leave gaps in things where people can put themselves, and it's a lot more meaningful that way.
I know your work. You've been working with your own voice, which has its challenges, and Nat, you're working with sound similarly, but it's quite a non-vocal kind of sound. I was wondering.
My voice is in there in some of it, but it's so distorted it can be far enough that I'm comfortable with it. But I guess yours is a lot more your voice.
Yeah, especially when we were testing it and there was a sort of 5-second clip about a seagull that was excruciating to listen to thousands of times.
So this is obviously, as Vic said, this is early stage R&D work. Part of the purpose of the Winter Residency is to provide a platform to start a project, not necessarily to finish it. So, Geraint, I wonder if you could talk about, like, where's next for this work? What's the plans?
So yeah, I've been thinking about stories a lot, and stories, the sort of structure of stories, and stories have a beginning and a middle and an end. But out there, they don't really. You know, when you're wandering out there, there's loads and loads of beginnings all over the show, and then some of them might turn into middles and endings, or maybe they're the same thing. I don't know. Yeah, it doesn't really work like that. So I've just been thinking about putting lots of beginnings everywhere that you could extrapolate from yourself, and that's it really. Just sort of you know, light lots of little fires and then walk away.
Not safety advice. How about you, Nat? What's next for you?
I think like you said as well, it seemed like I came up with one idea, and then when I started to research, I was like, this is a lot of different strands, and I think I've just touched the surface with a lot of them. But I think, yeah, I do want to develop the technology, and there are lots of fantastic suggestions I got in the halfway sharing about different haptic technologies, but really interlinked with how I can make them feel more alive. And we had lots of discussion on what makes something feel alive, what is communication. Yeah, there were some really good questions in that, but I don't know, there's a lot there. There's a lot to look at.
All right. So we'll open this to the audience in just a minute, so please do have your questions ready. But first, I'd like to ask if either of you have any questions for each other.
Well, the other day when you were telling me about your work and you were talking me through it, and you had to explain it about 4 times before I got it, the thing that I found really interesting was how you were hiding the technology in there, because I'm interested in that sort of hiding the medium and how you go about hiding the medium and how important that is for you and where it sits in all of your process.
Yeah, so that's really important. It's always about combining the tactile with the tech and how the tech can facilitate the interaction. And also there's something in tech that's innately intimidating to a lot of people. I've done like workshops and they're labelled as tech workshops, and people kind of come up to me and go, oh no, I don't do tech, and they just leave. And it's like, oh, okay. So I'm quite interested if we can integrate that into objects that we're familiar with, or a ritual we're familiar with, how that can change our thinking around it, or question something, or just become really playful, like an everyday object changes, like your tap, and becomes something else, which makes us rethink. I think that's really exciting.
Can I turn that back on you, Geraint, actually? Your work very much does also hide the tech, or at least certainly this piece does.
Yeah, it's sort of early days though, because as I say, I've been doing stuff that focuses completely on the medium for so long that I've sort of suddenly just sort of want to make stuff that completely hides it and embeds it in the world invisibly, and that you can just sort of come across something, serendipity, and experience it just sort of naturally,
So Nat, did you have any questions for Geraint?
Yeah, I guess, as you said, you came in with lots of ideas and then focused it onto one. And I know we've talked a bit about how to take your work outside when you've been looking at audio walks and things like that. But I guess where does the tap or plug holes sit in that series? And what's kind of the dream? What would the dream be if we had longer than 2 months? And yeah.
Yeah, I'm still trying to work out whether it's all one thing or if it's lots of little separate things. I'm not sure, but just having lots of really good conversations with everybody here about all the different ways that there are to do that, and it's been really exciting. Yeah, I'm not sure. It is all the same sort of thing, embedding little stories in places, and just sort of making a nudge to the sort of the thing that we all know, that the cat knows. We all know what the cat knows. And it's just, you know, it's just that everything's connected and everything is, you know.
Great. All right, I think we'll open it to the audience now. Does anyone have any questions? We've got one over here. We're going to send a microphone over to you, so hold on.
Hi, this is a question for Nat, really. I was really interested to see how your communication and technology worked, and I wondered whether you'd done a lot of work with people who are non-verbal using that communication, because it looked so friendly. And if people who are non-verbal were using that and the people who are verbal were also using it, it suddenly seems to become a level playing field. Does that fit in with your idea?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, in both senses. So the soft squishy objects actually came from working with pre-verbal children, first of all. So I developed these blobs in a space so the whole room became a synthesizer that could be controlled by people under 2. And that's sort of where I first played with that tech, because I had to make something. I couldn't put these big wooden pedals that I've been working with. I work a lot with wood, and I couldn't take that into a space with toddlers. And also developing my work now to work with more neurodiverse groups, and then sort of looking more at multi-sensory experience and the link with that with communication. Yeah, and I'm really glad they look friendly. Thank you.
Thanks. Back here.
Hi there. I've got a question about plug holes. I guess I've always thought of them as sort of scary, and I feel like they come up in horror films quite a lot, of like spiders coming out or pulling clumps of hair out of them and things. Was that something that you came across? Are you trying to make them not scary, or have you never thought of them as scary?
They are quite scary. A bit of serendipity at the beginning of all of this process. I started reading, speaking of horror, The Haunting of Hill House, Shirley Jackson, and it's just got a brilliant first paragraph. I think it's worth digging out. It's in here somewhere. Well, the first line, anyway. First line is, no live organism can continue for long to exist sanely under conditions of absolute reality. So it's not absolute actual reality. Maybe they're adjacent. That's probably a long conversation. But I think there's something about the stuff that comes out of the plug holes, which is maybe absolute reality, which you might want to switch off.
Anybody else? Ali at the front.
I'm really interested in the way that sound functions as in both of the works, and it's sort of like a split question, I suppose. For Nat, how did you settle on the kind of audio aesthetic of the work that you have settled on at this point? And for Geraint, what is it about, I suppose, like a spoken voice speaking to the person rather than like a weird sound, or like why words, I suppose is the question. It's 2 questions in one.
My words. It's quite difficult to say those things without words. I guess some things need to come out as words. But yeah, that is the sort of struggle of the show don't tell sort of thing. So that's why it is nice to be able to neutralise it. I struggled quite a lot with using my own voice, and wondered about whose voice it should be, but it felt sort of apt punishment. It should be myself. So,
Yeah, in terms of sound, it's actually something I always leave till the end, which I really shouldn't, because I really enjoy the construction and thinking about how the interaction works. So it is something in future I'd like to collaborate with someone on and actually have another voice in that process, because I think that could be really interesting. But in this project, kind of it's the first time I've worked with microphones, so not just using pre-recorded sounds, it's actually responding to the sounds in the space more. So that's a route that I've just started on. I'm excited to go down more because that's bringing more of who's into the space into that process as well, rather than these pre-recorded sounds. Yeah, but it's something I always leave till the end, and I really, really shouldn't.
All right. Anybody else? Over here.
Hi. Just a couple of questions. Just a couple. Just what is, for each of you, what was one of the best moments of being part of the artist residency? And I work with like young people, trying to kind of get them into the arts and stuff. If there was a young Nat and a young Geraint out there in the world finding their way, what words of advice would you give them?
I don't feel in any position to give anyone any advice. Well, then maybe they could listen to the plug hole. No, that's a bad idea. Sorry, what was the other half of the question?
Hello, yes. What was, I'm sure there were many, but what is one thing that you really enjoyed about being part of the artist residency at the Watershed? And I'll tell the kids you've got no
Just all the conversations, talking to people about all the different sort of ways that they've approached these questions, like Jack, talking to Jack about what 3 words and things, and using like Duncan's audio walks, and just having my eyes open to how many different ways there are to do stuff, and to have just really good conversations with people. It's been really, really great.
Yeah, in terms of highlights, I think mine is probably similar. It was probably the halfway sharing point where we got to talk to everyone in the space, and I've never had so many sort of engaged and probing questions. It's kind of terrifying but amazing, which, yeah, and people's generosity with their time, sort of people sat there with me for an hour and a half afterwards, chatting about different ways I could explore the project next, and just being in a space where you can do that, I think is quite rare and really valuable. In terms of words of advice, I don't know if I can give any either. I guess I feel like I've kind of gone full circle. I'm returning to things I enjoyed as a kid, like craft processes and things like that, which I probably then, I don't know, there is value in that, I guess. Just remember there's value in that, and that can become your job. Yeah, I would have liked to have known that, I think, maybe.
Anybody else got a question? Oh, at the back.
Yeah, this is a sort of question for both of you. I think sort of like with communication, it's about, you know, efficiently transferring information across. But with both of your pieces, it seemed like there were moments where maybe the communication could have been blurred or slightly broken. And I was wondering whether there was any interesting findings, or you took any inspiration from sort of like a lack of communication or broken communication in any way?
I think my work definitely comes from maybe sometimes struggling to communicate, so then thinking about other ways to communicate. So I guess that's coming from sometimes not having the words to communicate. Yeah, I'll keep thinking. I'm going to pass to you.
With the plug holes thing, it's something that I've sort of collected over quite a long time, you know, collecting these things that the plug hole would say to me. So I had a bit of a sort of stash of things ready to go, so I didn't really need to think about how to sort of communicate those things. So I sort of did that sort of work along the way. And then, yeah, I mean, in the actual using the thing itself, there is quite clear communication, really, and it's all about just whether you want that communication to exist or not. And you can, it's pretty on or off.
Anyone else in the audience? Yeah. Oh, here in the middle.
Hi, do either of you have like a clear next step as to what you're going to do next with these projects, or do you see it as sort of finished, or?
Definitely not finished, as you'll see if you go next door. So much to do with it. Like, I feel I got so many new starting points from chatting to people in the studio. So lots more research rabbit holes and lots more making. Kind of realised how much time it takes even to make these small sort of beings that are half done. But going down research rabbit holes with a bit more confidence maybe now. So a bit of making, a bit more research, just carrying on really, I think, but a long way to go.
Yeah, I think I'd quite like to put it somewhere out in the world and see, how people react to it. Sorry.
I think you should.
You don't know until you put these things out there how people will react to them, whether they'll even want to interact with it or not. Not sure if I would. Don't know. I don't know. And quite interesting to see if you put it in a gallery setting or you put it somewhere in the wild, what the differences would be in people's behaviour and their attitudes. That would be nice. But yeah, very much still a work in progress, as you'll see.
I guess that's a question for both of you, actually. Where do you imagine seeing these works ending up?
I think something where we do overlap is, well, correct me if I'm wrong, we both like the idea that people sort of just happen across them. So they're not necessarily in spaces you'd expect to come across something like that.
Yeah, I'd agree. Somewhere unexpected, moments of serendipity, moments where, you just open a little door and you sort of elevate the moment. Because, there's a lot of noise in life, isn't there? And, it's nice to sometimes put something in there to elevate things. And yeah.
Any other questions? Simone?
Hi. Question probably for Nat, actually. We kind of like heard a little bit about, your way of, creating this different sensory experience. And I'm quite interested in the storytelling or story making aspect of your devices. It feels quite open, a bit like when I think of the toy maker Kes Holman, actually, who produces toys that can be used in very different ways. So thinking of the application, how do you think, do you want to have impact on the story making, or would you like to leave it more open for people to explore their own ways of using your creations?
That's a good question, thank you. Whenever I'm making work, I always try and balance chance and control. So it's like what I'm placing there that's fixed, and then what's open for playful possibility. And I try always look and see how they're balanced. And I think as much as possible, I want that chance and that kind of option for the participants to tell the story. So it's almost something, I always talk about it as facilitate a space for that to happen. As I guess putting props or changing a space that can influence or invite a story that might not happen if they weren't there, I think is really exciting. But I think as much as possible, and maybe that's why I leave the sound till last, it's that content bit I'm a bit more removed from. It's sort of creating the form or the structure or the container for something exciting or unexpected to happen within. Does that answer your question?
Right, thank you very much. Yeah.
Actually, for you guys, you talked in the video quite a lot about story and wanting to find story, but the plug hole work is quite abstract in a way. There's not really a clear narrative to it. And I was wondering, can you talk a bit about that idea of like incomplete story that you were putting out there?
Yeah, it definitely fits within that whole sort of thing, doesn't it? Of putting things in in places, but yeah, it's not stories. So yeah, what I say about the beginnings of stories, they allow a lot more gaps for people, and I want to do a lot more of that, like sort of leaving these big spaces that people can fill themselves.
Right. Anyone else got a question? Oh, Vic.
I actually had a question for Nat, because we haven't really talked about adventure playgrounds, and they're like one of my favourite things. So I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit about like how you feel like adventure shows up in your work, more broadly.
I like the word adventure because I talk a lot about play, and I use the word play a lot, but it does fit it. But yeah, adventure, and I think adventure playgrounds, it's that scale as well, thinking about transforming whole spaces for us to be within is really exciting. And I think as well, like the materials, and when I was working with this person that makes adventure playgrounds, it was just like, yeah, you can use anything. They just said yes to all of this and building, and it became really exciting. That sort of construction was part of the process. And I think adventure playgrounds invite that curiosity and invite you to build spaces and change them and influence them. Yeah, I'm going to start using the word adventure more. Thank you, Vic.
Anyone else got any last questions before we move through? Oh, Drew.
Thank you very much. My question was a bit about, I guess, on the same question before about play, and in terms of play and whimsy, I guess. But in terms of, it can be quite hard to coax like serious adults into playing, or like, you know, shaking off getting into that kind of mindset. And I wondered if, as part of making any of your works, that was something you explored, like how to best, you know, make people a bit less serious and be willing to engage in the more playful side of themselves.
Definitely, that's, yeah, I think one of the main purposes, and having spaces where people can play as adults is really rare, and where there's not set rules or outcomes. Yeah, I think that's really important to have that space that's open. Yeah, definitely something that drives a lot of my work. Yeah.
I'm not sure. But I think there's something about saying something serious in a serious way and saying something serious in a silly way, which I think maybe Plug Holes is about a little bit. But I'm not really sure.
You said that thing at the start of your video about trying to do serious things and people finding them funny. I was wondering if you could maybe talk a little bit more about that.
Well, again, I don't know, but it might be because, you know, sort of pointing at stuff and going, no, that's interesting, or that's important, and saying to someone, that's just an excruciating thing to do, isn't it? You know. So it might be, you know, an embarrassment about that sort of act. Yeah, or it might be, you know, because everything is absurd anyway. Or it might be, I don't know.
Any other questions from the audience? If not, then maybe we'll invite everyone to say thank you again to Nat and Geraint. All right, in just a moment, we're going to invite you to head through to the studio and see the works for yourselves. But first, I've got a few people we need to thank. First of all, our phenomenal winter resident artists, Nat Whitney and Geraint Edwards. Everyone who's helped along the way, including our phenomenal studio community, who have all been incredible at giving their time and expertise towards these projects. John Aiken and Jack Alford, who made the wonderful films that you saw just now. Yeah, good. Our photographer tonight, Charlie Williams. Our wonderful BSL interpreter, Nikki Harris. And our supporters, My World and Arts Council England, without whom none of this would be possible. I'm sure Arts Council England appreciate the round of applause. Please do also fill out our survey if you get the chance. It only takes a few minutes and it really does help us. There is a QR code available if you're in the room, and if you're watching on YouTube, the link should be being put in the YouTube chat. Bridget is demonstrating the QR code right now for everyone. I would very much like to invite everyone who is here in person to grab another drink, some snacks, come on through to the studio and see the work that has been made. If you're watching us online, thank you very much for joining us. We will say goodnight to you now. It's been lovely to have you, and we hope we'll see you again soon. Thank you, everyone.